The order Ephemeroptera, the mayflies, are part of an ancient order called the Paleoptera. That also includes dragon and damselflies. Paleoptera nymphs emerge through the shuck that is split between the head and the wing case, a process that in part is propelled by gases that have built up within the shuck. Paleoptera emerge from water and on land. The video shown here is made from 2,600 images of a Paleoptera emerging on land, taken 2 seconds apart, compressed into 40 seconds total. This time-lapse video shows how emergence is a continuous process that can be broken down into a series of snapshots that lead to an adult fly. To tie in an emerger, the tyer selects a snapshot and designs a fly that simulates that point in the process. An obvious point to tie for in the emergence process is one where the nymphs are both vulnerable and exposed to trout predation. A widely utilized vulnerable point to tie for is when the nymph is rising too near the surface to emerge and drifts along, trying to break through the surface tension, or the film as it's called. Swisher and Richards in their book on emergers discuss how nymphs become more buoyant by generating a thin layer of gas between the subadult's body and its shuck. This observation, along with new imagery, document that gas generation is apparently active enough that it can, according to Mike Lawson in his book Spring Creeks, expand the shuck to the point of releasing it from the subadult's body, and two, seemingly go on to generate enough gas that the thorax becomes bubbled up, thereby potentially providing enough pressure to help split the shuck, as well as actively aid in ejecting that subadult out onto the surface tension where it can emerge completely as an adult. As gas accumulation proceeds during emergence, the nymph's shuck swells and it becomes more buoyant and consequently rises to near the surface of the water. Here they can hover for minutes, as is occurring in this remarkably clear close-up image of a Callibaetis emerger made by Ralph and Lisa Cutter. In this image, you can clearly see the shiny reflections from the gas-lined abdomen, as well as reflections coming from the bulging, bubble-like thorax of the subadult inside the shuck. The gas layer and expanding gas bubble in the thorax also reflects light, making the emergers glow with a yellow to golden sheen during emergence, as described by Ralph Cutter in his book Fish Food, a fact that emerger designs like bubble nymphs exploit by adding beads, tinsels, wires, micro bubble trapping CDC, loop wings, epoxy, foam, and so forth. To produce fish attracting light flashes coming from the abdomen, thorax, and trailing shuck of the fly. Most important in my view for determining an emergence point to tie a fly for is the observation made by Swisher and Richards that tiny gas bubbles can be seen seeping from cracks developing in the swelling thorax. Bob Heinrich took this image of a gas bubble developing on the thorax of a centrella mayfly nymph, unique visual evidence of gas leakage occurring during emergence. Even with some gas leakage, this nymph 2 minutes later went on to be a fully emerged adult seen here. While a little gas loss did not prevent complete emergence this time, my theory is that in some cases, excessive gas leakage from the thorax will reduce buoyancy, depressurize the shuck, and cause it to contract and in fact hold the subadult in place, as seen in this image of a naturally occurring split case nymph. For the natural split case nymph not to complete emergence and stay that way long enough to be streamed out of the stream and photographed suggests the nymph is trapped in the shuck, on the way to being stillborn and maybe already there. The point is that some gas loss can freeze the emergence process at any point and enables us to make and effectively fish an imitation of that point in the emergence process. Somewhat past the split case point in the emergence process is where the split case subadult is beginning to bring its wings out of the wing case. Wings that with excessive gas loss can also hang up in the shuck, as captured in this finely detailed image taken by Bruce Ashley. The image shows both a natural nymph with a swollen wing case at the top of the image paired with its split case emerger below that. The split case emerger shows a canopy-like arc of shiny transparent wings that appear to have become stuck while coming out of the wing case in what now is a stillborn emerger. The canopy-like arc of the partially deployed wings sticking out of the wing case is the natural model used to tie what I call, no surprise here, the canopy emerger. I think the low arc of the micro tubing tied in over the thorax produces a more realistic profile, more natural, and more like the natural seen in Ashley's image as compared to, say, a glass bead tied in on top of the thorax or a loop wing placed there. A nifty feature of the canopy emerger is that it can be tied for the bubble nymph stage on through to the canopy-like wing stage using one basic fly body, and on that chassis add a wing with an increasing arc of the micro tubing that represents an increasing degree of wing deployment from bubble to the canopy nymph stage. The canopy emerger presented in this video presents a style pattern that can be adjusted in size and degree of wing deployment and color to match mayflies at various degrees of emergence and from various places around the country. Finally, according to Swisher and Richards, a similar development of increased buoyancy is also seen in midge pupa, who, like mayflies, also generate gases in their shuck and rise to the near surface, where they may hover for long drifts. So many of the canopy emerger design principles discussed here also apparently apply to midges. So following the canopy fly tying portion of the video, the recipe of this variant, of the midge variant, and others are shown. Where I start tying the canopy emerger is I make up a tube, one of these micro tubes like this material. This is medium, small, and then also the hairline makes a standard, which is about equal to the Wapsi medium, and then there's the micro tubing here. What I do is I pull in some tinsel, or in the case of the micro tubing, I pull in wire because it's just simply too difficult and the tinsel is too wide to pull it through. How I do that, though, is I take a piece of stainless steel wire here, and it's about 6-inch piece, and I fold it over like that to make a small loop there, and I cut it so the wires are uneven, and I thread one wire into the tube, and then I bring it up and fit the other wire in. So what you end up is with this type of thing. Here's the uneven wires. Here's this is medium tubing, and sorry, that's the small tubing, and this is the stainless steel wire. And then you have your tinsel that you thread through this. It's about 1.5 inch piece of tubing, and then we just pull it through like that and cut it off, and you have your tinsel tubing. If you just want to go with one, you can always just pull one out, which is what I like, because I want a lot of air in the tubing, because it helps this nymph remain buoyant, because you have air inside this tube that is actually sealed when you tie it in. The other parts of this nymph that are sort of unique, because this pattern is based on a pheasant tail, an American style pheasant tail, but it is a pattern style, so you can adapt it to any nymph type. But the other thing I use is these maguzum beads, which are faux gold beads. These are 2 millimeter. I measure them out at 2.2 millimeter, but these are 750 of them that I bought for, I don't know, $4 off of eBay. And these are light. These are made of plastic. So these are the beads I use. If I want the floating version of this, or near surface floating version, I use these faux beads and tinsel. And if I wanted to go deep, then I use the standard tungsten beads, and I use the wires and such, and don't worry about buoyancy so much. Tying the Canopy Emerger today. I've already started the fly. I put the bead on a Tiemco 206BL size 18 hook. I've tied in the nano silk copper colored 30D, and I put in a thin piece of stainless steel wire. And now I'm going to tie in the shuck, which I represent using some root beer colored midge flash. And I tie it using the pinch method. Couple rounds, and I pull it back and tie it in slightly around the bend. That's just how I like to tie them. I think it gives, if you have a curved body, it gives some impression of movement. Okay, I take 2 fibers of the center tail of a ring-necked pheasant. I clip off the sort of worn ends to get to a thicker part, and then I tie that in. I only use 2, and I use 2 because I want a thin body, but also if one breaks, then I can continue to wind forward. So I want a thin body because that's what I learned up in Cheeseman Canyon, that the thinnest flies are what catch fish up there. So it's sort of carried over to all the rivers I fish. This ring-necked pheasant comes from Feathercraft. They have a extra large center tail that comes out of Europe, and it has great color, and you get approximately 1.5 inches of usable brown colored barbule to wrap these thin flies. So you can make pretty nice uniform body even on some larger size guys. Okay. Haven't trimmed the tail yet. The shuck, I should say. Now I'm using silver wire here because of the gas-filled body impression I'm trying to give, and the reflections from that abdomen being gas-filled. This stainless steel wire is tough stuff, and it's a little hard on your scissors, but I think it's worth it because it won't ever tarnish. And I use the stainless in the tubes too, because those are going to get dampness around them, and you can tarnish the other kinds of feathers. And now I'm going to tie in my tube. This turns out to be a tinsel-filled one. It looks a small size tubing, not the micro. And I tie it back about 1/3 of the way of the hook shank. Well, not, maybe behind the bead, between the bead and the bend, 1/3 of the way. Okay, then I wax up my thread to do the touch dubbing. What did I do with the pack? I cut the corner out of these packs. I saw this on the web, and you can just pull out what you need. This is the Sabai fine flash dubbing in black. I think it's the best representation of the peacock color, and I've used it all over the West and found it works quite well. Then I spin it on. The reason I like this method is because I get a lot of fuzziness to it that in this case, look like legs. I think when we get to the finished wrap here. I'm particularly winding a lot towards the rear because when that tubing comes over, I want to make sure that it stays far back enough that it doesn't pull forward. It's a kind of a gentle process. So you don't compress these tubes, especially the stretch tube. If you pull too hard, it just pulls it right flat and you don't get a good canopy look to the fly. And then I got to trim this to about 3/4 of shank length. The reason I use the root beer on the back is it's durable and gives a little extra flash back there. But I use 2 in case one breaks off. So I got an error and a spare sort of deal. There, the Canopy Emerger with a leggy. A variant of the canopy nymph that I tie uses a double tube. So I've tied in the tube and on top, and then folded it back over on itself, and then so it'll make a double tube. And in this version, I also do this in the single tube version, is I tie in a bit of underflash under the tube here. This is medium pearl tinsel. And then I add in the some touch dubbing of the fine flash subai, fine flash dubbing in black, which to me comes out looking more like peacock. Spin it on. The longer you spin it, the tighter it is. And I like to do it this way, this touch dubbing, because I get a real buggy look to the fuzzy dubbing look. I couldn't have done that. Then I pull the tube 1 and 2 on top of each other. This gives me a bigger tubing, bigger canopy. And the canopy nymph gets its name, by the way, because I think it looks like the canopy on a jet fighter, that little twist of tubing over the top of the wing case. Okay, then I double whip finish. But no cement. I don't like the head cement getting in the eye of the fly when I'm standing in the middle of a wide river. There it is, a double Canopy Emerger.